Introduce your question. 30 seconds, please.
Thanks, Curl. It's kind of sad and funny to hear the Minister talking about anomalies and no listening to her and the sort of amnesia that affects her and the Fine Gael party generally, and indeed Fianna Fáil. You brought in
question,
those.
Please.
You changed those bans.
You
changed those bans and inflicted that suffering on the women concerned, the pre-2012. The other anomaly I want to ask you about, obviously, is the Labour Court recommendation of 19293 of July 2008 in relation to pensions for the 1,250 CE supervisors and assistant supervisors who manage 25,000 staff, as you know, Cathaoirleach, carrying out wonderful work all over our parishes and communities throughout this island. Several commitments have been made that we would address this anomaly, this other anomaly, and you've done nothing so far, Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister.
Just in relation to the Deputy's preamble, I just put on the record that it never ceases to amaze me the conceitedness of the far left on the monopoly of compassion that they think they own.
I don't want a second preamble.
I propose to take PQs 6, 14 and 17 together, Chairman. And the Community Employment Scheme supervisors are employees of private companies in the community and the voluntary sector that receive public funding, and they're not employees of my department, or indeed are they public servants. There are currently 1,346 supervisors and assistant supervisors employed within the community employment-sponsored organisations. And the Department does, as you know, fund wages and training costs in respect of CE participants and the supervisors, but it does not and has not ever provided provision for funding for CE supervisor pensions. Employers, including CE sponsoring organisations, are legally obliged to offer access to at least one standard personal savings account, PRSA, under the Pension Amendments Act of 2002, and I'm sure the Deputy well knows that. But on foot of the Labour Court recommendations, the issue of CE supervisors' pension is currently being examined by the Community Sector High-Level Forum, which is chaired by the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. And a number of departments, including my own, are represented on this group, as indeed are the unions and PUBL. A detailed scoping exercise was carried out with the input from the Irish Government Economic and Evaluation Services on the potential costs of providing Exchequer reports for the establishment of such a pension scheme for employees across the community and voluntary sector in Ireland. And the exercise clearly illustrated that the matter presents a very significant impact to the Exchequer, with the potential cost to the state of €188 million per annum every annum in respect of the funding to enable an employer pension contribution in state-funded community and voluntary organisations, excluding any provision for an immediate ex gratia lump sum payment of pension as sought, which could, depending on the size of the sector, entail a further Exchequer cost of up to €318 million. And whilst, Chair, I am very conscious that the issue relates to the community employment supervisors and assistant supervisors, such individuals do only comprise of one small sector of the wider community and voluntary sector, and any provision of state funding for a scheme in respect of those employees will potentially give rise to claims for similar schemes on the part of those in the broader sector, thus crystallising the potential level of liability. Any solution to this issue will require careful cooperation and consideration, and in particular consideration for the scarce resources of the economy.
Thank you very much. Now, first call on Deputy Broughan and then Deputy Brady. So 60 seconds.
Last few points you're making, Minister, it's the old mantra. I think when community employment and later on JI was set up, people, I think it was Rory Quinn actually who began the SES scheme in the mid-80s, a long time ago, but people didn't realise at that stage it would become such a fundamental part of our society in terms of local development, in terms of training, in terms of caring, in terms of childcare, of course, a whole range of development. And just to say, I'm a director on behalf of the community, I think, of a number of these companies, as I have been before politics and all through my political career. But I mean, the wonderful work that's carried out both for the individual themselves in their training and indeed for the work that they do, it has to be recognised. Now, I know the Lansdowne Road Agreement, I think you refer to that, the high-level forum, which I think Deeper actually chairs. We were expecting expecting, I think, in late 2017, we would have some output from that. And we had a debate here, a 2-hour debate, I think, which our Sinn Féin colleagues put forward, in which clearly the figures, the kind of costs, you're quoting the Irish Government Economic and Evaluation Service of 400 or 500 million, but we put those figures at a much lower cost in budgetary terms, and I think that's something that has to be revisited urgency. But in justice, Minister, every one of us is deeply aware and grateful for all the work that's been carried out. Local groups, they are very valiantly trying to support their supervisors, their assistant supervisors, for brilliant work that they've done over decades. And I think it's something that, like your previous question in relation to the women's pensions pre-2012, you should recognise it now and begin to move on it. Thanks, Cahirla.
Minister, the programme for government states that the government will respect the WRC, the Workplace Relations Commission, and the Labour Court, and ensure that both bodies are supported to fulfil their roles. So I'm asking as to whether that commitment still stands. And even when we were dealing with the Employment Miscellaneous Bill, there was a number of amendments, and the Minister cited legitimate concerns as to the implications those amendments would have on the workings of the WRC and the Labour Court, and that was dealt with. There is a quite clear ruling from the WRC in 2008 that has been ignored by successive ministers, successive governments, affecting 1,250 CE supervisors and their assistants. The Minister hides behind the scoping exercise that is being carried out. She brings in community and voluntary sector and comes up with this figure of 188 million, which had no part of the WRC ruling back in 2008. They were quite clear, quite categorical in what was being proposed, that it had to be pensions for CE supervisors and their assistants. Minister, can I get an exact figure as to how much it will cost solely for the CE supervisors and their assistants to put in place a pension scheme for those individuals doing exceptional work across the communities in the state?
The Minister comes back in, and I'm going to make this appeal because both of you have to come back in. There's two deputies have been sitting here a long time, Deputy Turkin and Deputy Murphy O'Mahony, and I want to ensure that they get in before 12 so that their questions can be answered. So again, I ask you to stick to the rules and regulations which we all agree to in running this House. So I'm going to ask you all to be brief so that we can accommodate those two deputies who have been sitting here a long time.
Thanks, Chair. The first thing I'll say is that the Community Sector High-Level Forum includes representatives of not only the various government departments, statutory agencies, but also the union representatives. And to be fair, the forum is chaired by DEPR, but it includes the various departments, obviously, that have responsibilities towards the community and voluntary sector, and not just the valuable organisations that provide RCE schemes for my department, but it extends to various other departments, and the responsibilities towards those people that provide valuable services in our community is recognised by all of the departments, and that's why the High-Level Forum was established. Deputy, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the history of this case was that the Labour Court made a recommendation. They don't make a ruling, they made a recommendation. And that recommendation has been scoped by input from the independent Government Economic and Evaluation Services on the potential costs of providing exchequer support to all of the community and voluntary service, because unlike you as an opposition deputy, we don't have the option of picking or pitting one part of the community and voluntary sector against another. And so if you're going to do something, you respect equally the contribution that all of the community and voluntary sector makes. And that's why this is such a difficult task, because if it was easy to fix, it would have already been fixed. And to answer your question, no, we haven't looked at individual costs for CEs, because you can't fix this problem without causing another problem over there. And we've learned the lessons of the past of trying to fix things in a small piecemeal way by not ignoring or by ignoring the outputs from there.
Can we have a quick comment from both you first, Deputy Broughan? And then
thanks. Well, Minister, you could make a start, I think, with the community employment supervisors and the assistant supervisors, I mean, you know, there's no question. We did have this debate. I don't think the IG's figures that I quoted earlier, I don't know, up to 500 million or whatever, that's obviously if you have an immediate big bang approach. But if you deal with the injustice, with the fact that you know, recommendation 19293, it's sitting there for 10 years, whatever excuse could have been made in relation to the crash and the aftermath and the austerity period, you know, there's no validity in that now. I mean, it's crying out for justice. Now, you yourself, you've been floating the idea, obviously, the supplementary savings scheme, the automatic enrolment, this plan by, you know, for 2022-23, that this will not happen again to any segment of our society for people who have given very valuable service to communities. But so, you know, can't you therefore, in line with that, begin in this budget, and the Budget Committee were meeting Minister Paschal Donohoe this afternoon, as a start, can you not implement this recommendation at a very modest cost?
Minister, I'm not asking you to introduce anything piecemeal. I'm asking you to introduce the full recommendations of the WRC back in 2008. And what their recommendations laid out would cost a fraction of the 188 million in which you cite those figures of. So we're not talking about piecemeal. We're talking about, you know, following up your commitments in the programme for government, honouring and respecting the WRC and not being an impediment in the work that they actually carry out. Now, there was a Dáil motion passed here before the summer recess, brought forward by your friends in Fianna Fáil, which Sinn Féin supported, calling on government to implement the recommendations from the WRC. So, Minister, can I ask, we're coming into the budgetary process. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have a negotiated budget presented between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Can I ask as to whether there have been any discussions at this stage about implementing the Dáil motion, which was voted through? Have there been any discussions between Fianna Fáil and yourselves about implementing the pensions for CE supervisors and their assistants? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have a quick final comment from you, Minister, so we can move on to
Thanks, Chair. Just to remind the both deputies, because they seem to maybe ignore this or have forgotten it, the high-level forum not only consists of people from a variety number of departments who, as I said, Chair, have responsibility to the voluntary and the community sectors, but it also includes representatives of Pobal, and it includes representatives of Forsa and SIP2, who are the people's representatives in that community and voluntary sector. If there were suggestions as to how we could find, magically, the €500 million that's potentially needed, and maybe, Johnny, you'll come out with a great budget yourself in the next couple of weeks and show us what you'd cut or what you'd actually stop doing to provide that extra 500 million every year, and we might have a look at it. If there was an easy solution to this, Chair, then the high-level forum, including the representative bodies of both unions, we would have already found that solution. But the meetings of that high-level forum will continue. The unions have met with the Minister over the summer months and do actively and will actively continue to pursue ideas in an effort to try and resolve this issue. It's not going to be fixed until we all find a solution to be able to fix it, and we'll continue to work on it.